Chapter 1.1 Line Shape and the Principle of Contrast. The goals are to identify line as a foundational element of art, to understand shape as a development from line, and to begin to understand the possibilities for the principle of contrast. We'll talk about all kinds of lines, some shapes, and what fun contrast can be. I'm going to keep throwing these out there at first because they matter so much for the first half of this course. The elements of art, the basic vocabulary of art. As we are discussing in this chapter, line and shape are elements of art. The principles of art, or grammar of art. How the elements of art are arranged within the image becomes the principles. The principles are listed here again, and we can see that contrast, as we will discuss in this chapter, is a principle of art. The book says lines are the most fundamental element that artists use. I definitely think that's true for most artists. Lines help us get our first thoughts and impulses into reality. They are what words are to writers, foundations for everything that comes after. Here is the first type of line we'll cover. Contour line is a line that creates the edge or profile of an object but not necessarily the complete outline of a shape. Contour lines show up in a lot of different applications. They can be used to suggest elevation on a map, create the structure of a rendered object, and playfully outline a subject such as the woman Matisse drew. Not all lines are real, or at least not all lines are complete. Implied lines are lines that are only suggested by elements such as dots or dashes working together to suggest a line. In the chart on the left, you can see the two categories of actual lines and implied lines. In the implied lines, you can see how dashes and dots in unison create the sense of a line, yet I hope we can all agree no lines are present, except in the case of the vertical thick lines for which the top of them creates the motion of a curved line. Guillaume Apollinaire has used calligraphy to create the implied lines of a human form. When text is used in an implied line, the image becomes a calligram. Directional lines. These are strong lines. They do exactly what the artist wants them to do. That's more or less true, but usually there is a lot of intention and forethought with directional lines. They communicate movement and direction. They take the viewer's eye where the artist wants it to go. Comic books are often good examples of directional lines at play. In James Allen's The Connectors, there is much more space in the image, so the directional lines become more obvious and stronger in the composition. These strong directional lines create an internal visual framework within the image, giving the worker's scene weight and importance in the vast, lightly rendered urban space below them. Communicative line. Graphic designers know about these three categories and more, but these basic three are pretty standard. Vertical lines communicate strength, stability, and authority. Horizontal lines communicate calm, peace, and passiveness. And diagonal lines communicate movement, action, and drama. So using these types as examples, communicative line independently communicates meaning, information, or feeling. Nike's use of a diagonal line signifies speed and motion, and Van Gogh's bedroom is fraught with vertical lines as though one might fall through the floor. Possibilities of line. These are the styles, the flavors, the feeling capacities that line is capable of. Really, there are probably more than three of these categories as well, but the book does a good job to broadly define three. Barbara Hepworth was thinking like a sculptor when she made these drawings. Even though she is playing with possibilities for line, her shapes are all very architectural. Freedom and passion. I really like this category. Georgina Houghton made this drawing about 75 years before abstract and non-objective art became popular in Europe. Glory Be to God is a good example of lines creating non-objective art. George Bellows, on the right, asks us to love what he loved, but not in a demanding way. He's using the same drawing utensils for every mark, a black crayon, and with varying intensities of his hand, he's making the road dark and heavy, the sky thick but moving. He's got thick lines and thin lines, long lines and quick short lines. He's telling us a story with line, that these objects and this place is important to him. Shape, the next element in the chapter. It's any two-dimensional area where the boundaries are defined by lines or suggested by changes in color or value. A circle is a shape. It has a width and a height. In this case, they are the same. Basic shapes can become so many things to the artist. Two broad categories of shape are geometric and organic. That will be on the quiz. In Miriam Shapiro's work, we get both geometric and organic shapes working well together. The geometric shapes become optical illusions in a tile-patterned background, and the organic shapes dominate the foreground. On the right, there are dots, dashes, and thick lines. Technically, there are no shapes, yet our eyes are constantly telling our brains that there is a shape within the image. This is a rudimentary form of optical illusion. We call these implied shapes, a pentagon, a peanut, and a pyramid, that our minds want to exist within all that space. Implied shapes are the appearance of a shape with no continuous boundary. On the bottom right are optical illusions utilizing implied shapes. Do you see a triangle or three semicircles? On the right, a reversal in the pattern creates the triangle. The AT&T logo is not a blue circle and it is not a blue sphere. It is a series of blue lines in various lengths and widths that create the implied shape of a circle. The last concept, contrast, is an element or principle of art. It's a principle. Contrast happens when two of the elements of art are noticeably on opposite ends of their possible application, such as opposites of value like black and white. In Nomabar's image of a pistol, initially we see the black part as a positive shape, and the white as the negative space behind the shape. Slowly we realize that the beige negative space also contains the shape of a head. This reversal of negative space and positive shape is called a figure ground reversal. M.C. Escher on the right has also created a figure ground reversal in his tessellation of fish and birds. Georgia O'Keeffe. I want to focus on her a bit because she became quite a legend after she died, and we're going to have an interactive art project based on her way of painting. Her paintings also really beautifully express shape and contrast. In her painting, Music, Pink and Blue 2, amazing title, she was inspired by so many things: music, the landscape, flowers, the abstract paintings of other artists. She also created a figure ground reversal like the work from the last slide, but O'Keeffe's figure ground reversal is more subtle because she did it with multiple colors and less dramatic contrast. The deep blue oval and the bright white flaps around it are competing to be the positive shape or the negative space. Okay, last slide. Carol Walker is alive. She is a living artist who has also deservedly become very successful. Her work is best known for addressing issues of race, gender, and American history. She utilizes silhouetted figures that were a popular motif to express personal identity in the designs of the 1800s. Walker's use of these historical designs is a good example of shapes and contrast in action. Thank you for listening.